I don't see myself as disabled. I am disabled by society, and society, the one that we live in, is governed by the EU. I think they can make the bigger changes for us and on our behalf.
When we all started off on our journey to Strasbourg, we were full of negativities with our own government, with the funding situation, a feeling that the state had let us down. So why did we all come here? Well, I suppose the answers in our minds were, it was basically with the human rights agenda.
I think that for the Irish presidency this should be one of the priorities, because it's all very well and good having a year dedicated to people with disabilities, but if nothing comes out of it, if there is no sort of move forward, if there is nothing concrete that people can say, well yes, look, this and this and this has been achieved, then what's it all for?
We want the European community to share in our vision and release the untapped potential that disabled people have.
Throughout the summer of 2003, the European Year of People with Disabilities, many people with disabilities and their organisations throughout Ireland came together through workshops and meetings to discuss the European Union and the impact it has on disabled people. Today it is estimated that people with disabilities represent between 10 and 15% of the total population of Europe, a figure that exceeds the population of almost every European country. As one of the most socially marginalised sectors of the European Union, what is the impact of EU membership on our rights? And how can we exercise those rights? Those were the questions raised throughout the summer of 2003, and ideas to present these concerns and demands to the very centre of European power in Strasbourg, the European Parliament and the Court of Human Rights came about.
Up to freedom, drivers!
The organisations involved in bringing people together to meet in Strasbourg were the European Network on Independent Living, ENIL, and the Centre for Independent Living, or as it's known in Ireland, CIL. Founded in 1989, ENIL is an umbrella organisation of individuals and disability groups dedicated to promoting independent living among the 40 million people with disabilities throughout Europe today, as well as with the general public.
Because independent living is about everything to do with a person's life and what one does, and that's both in work and in leisure. The disabled people want control of their lives. They want more choices, and they want to be able to do the things they want to do. And until they get that control, that power, and that ownership about what they're involved with and what they're doing, I think disabled people will always be disenfranchised and will always be excluded.
Ask people with disabilities themselves what they want. Ask them what they need, and then try and provide the service for them as they need it.
Trip to Strasbourg under the auspices of the European Network on Independent Living is absolutely key to the progression of the independent living movement agenda.
The independent living philosophy advocates living like everyone else, with people taking control of their own life, having opportunities to make decisions affecting that life, and being able to pursue activities of their own choosing, regardless of disability. This is a significant departure from the historical medical model approach to disability. This locates disability exclusively within the body, passively dependent, sick people in need of care, and often that care taking place within institutions. With this model, a person with a disability must adapt to fit in to society. However, the social model of disability, promoted by independent living, sees the problem as residing in the physical environment and the prevailing attitudes. Society is disabling in its very nature, each time it restricts access to public places, transport, entertainment, or education and employment opportunities. Within this model, the disabled person is no longer perceived as the patient, but they are seen in terms of being a consumer or a member of society, part of an oppressed group that are prevented from achieving their full potential as active citizens, with full rights and entitlements. This idea is the very core concept of independent living.
The medical model sees the individual like myself as being the problem. It attempts to treat the symptoms, that, in other words, my needs from a symptomatic point of view, and are driven from a corporate or generalised service provision. The social model sees me, first of all, as a person who is well able to identify my own needs and be the predominant element in determining my own needs in a total needs assessment, not just treat the symptoms, not just treat me as the problem. I am not the problem. Disabled people are not the problem. The environment around us is the problem.
The advantages about challenging traditional care systems, opening up the whole rights framework and the rights-based agenda for people with disabilities.
The impact of the European Union on people with disabilities was the focus for discussion in the run-up to the Freedom Drive. Ireland at present is waiting on the enactment of a rights-based disabilities bill, but the influence of the European Union on disabled people's lives is becoming more and more apparent. With Ireland due to hold the presidency of the Council of Ministers for the first 6 months of 2004, the importance for people with disabilities to have their voices heard on both the national and European level was a priority for participants as they joined with their European neighbours in Strasbourg. On September 23rd, more than 150 EU citizens from all across Europe, including France, Germany, Italy, Norway, Spain and the UK, and of course 32 Irish participants, converged on Strasbourg to begin a 3-day period of meetings. The first day of the Freedom Drive began by meetings between national groups and their respective MEPs to discuss the 8 key demands of the Freedom Drivers. These demands were a Europe-wide policy on personal assistance, the right to gain personal assistance services regardless of cost, the right to retain personal assistance funding when travelling regardless of length or purpose of journey, action to address the growing number of people with disabilities being institutionalised, more effective representation of people with disabilities in European social inclusion strategies, promotion of the appropriate implementation of the philosophy of independent living, 5% of overseas development aid to be given to community development projects for people with disabilities in developing countries, and action to highlight and address the significant human rights abuses that many disabled people experience. The President of the European Parliament, Mr. Pat Cox, MEP, attended the Irish meeting, as did John Hume, taking time to address the group with some inspiring words.
I think that the more that disabled organisations in every country go to their parliaments and meet directly with not only with their members of parliament but the members of government in order to get their problems fully understood and in order to get action taken on their problems, that is, I think, what should be happening, and today is an example, I hope, of a beginning of that process.
Individuals who had travelled from each of the participating countries were given time to express their concerns. Central to these concerns was the need for more effective representation of people with disabilities within Europe.
With our demands, and we want them seriously taken on board, because for too long now, for years before we came over, we were writing and nothing seriously and concrete has been happening. So when we're coming over, I think it's put right to their faces and in their offices. It's the European Parliament. I think that done them some good. It opened their eyes up.
We are awaiting a redraft of the Irish Disabilities Bill, and that's due out pretty soon. Preliminary indications seem to be that it will be rights-based, but we have to look at the text.
Disabled people aren't at the decision-making tables, that we aren't in the powerful rooms where decisions are made.
Laws that says that it is illegal to discriminate against disabled people. That's no guarantee, but it is a signal, a strong signal to the authorities and people in general.
The draft disability legislation is something disabled people as a group feel the need for, and to underpin the rights of disabled people with a legislative bill, it should enable people to seek their rights in an authoritative way rather than currently in a almost charitable way in which people have to plead for services and plead for aids and appliance and approach local public representatives. All of this is not the way in which disabled people should have their rights met, and we hope that the forthcoming legislation will be rights-based.
Elected officials were then able to give feedback to the demands.
I think that the 8 demands of the Charter that's been presented to us are just and reasonable and proper. There's about 20 of us in the European Parliament, MEPs from all parties and all countries, who passionately support the call for disability rights, support the call for nothing about us without us. The enormous effort that's gone into bringing people from every corner of the European Union with no funding, the success that there's been in hammering on the doors of members of the European Parliament who frankly haven't ever before listened to disabled people must be sustained.
Without participation in the decision-making process, more often than not, decision makers get it wrong because they don't actually understand where people with disabilities are coming from and what they actually need. And you can only do that by allowing those with disabilities to have a major input into the decision-making process, because they're the ones who actually have the solutions.
However, this struggle for rights is not exclusive to present EU member states. 2004 will bring the biggest expansion of the European Union that we have ever seen. The transition from a community of 15 to one of 25 member states will become a major challenge. It is important that citizens of new member states benefit from the experience and struggles that have gone before in countries such as Norway, which has provided huge leadership in the development of independent living for disabled people.
The importance of this visit is that what I've become aware of is that so many people in Europe don't have these rights, and I think that should be available to all disabled people, regardless of where you live.
One of the wonderful things that's came out of today's visit, to know that there are people at the European level that does have a positive influence on us, but can influence our state. So we are fighting this battle now for disability rights at a higher level, at the level of Strasbourg, and we are willing to go all the way and take all it takes to get there.
What we need to do in Ireland first and foremost as the way forward is to absolutely ensure that any legislation such as the forthcoming disability bill is protecting us, that it is a piece of legislation that offers rights, that offers redress in the courts, and that protects the individual, and that insists that the state is responsible for the equal participation of disabled people through independent living and offering choice and control.
Some of the challenges that I would reckon is that we would have to be facing is the accession of the 10 new states that are coming in, or the 2 new applicant member states, and making sure that they don't have to go through the same fight that we've had to put up with.
As well as awareness of issues on a European level, one of the 8 key demands dealt with the importance of ring-fencing 5% of overseas development aid. This to be given to projects for people with disabilities in developing countries.
We feel that if 5% of that can be ring-fenced for the disabled community in those countries where relief and emergency aid are given by the EU, that would be a step forward.
On the morning of Wednesday, September 24th, the largest ever gathering of people with disabilities marched from Strasbourg town to the front of the European Parliament buildings. Representatives from many of the countries taking part then addressed the assembled crowd to express the concerns of everyone there. After which, the 8 key demands were officially handed over to Mary Benotti, MEP, as Pat Cox's representative.
We believe that the money currently invested in institutions which disempower us just waste people's lives. We ask you to divert these monies, to give us personal assistance, to give us independent living.
Nothing about us without us.
Conditions that force us and keep us in residential institutions and parental homes for lack of acceptable alternatives rob us of mainstream life.
Critical issues expressed included the need for action to address the growing number of disabled people being institutionalised and the vital role that personal assistance services and direct payments can play in addressing this issue as a means of empowering people with disabilities.
We know best how to run our own lives. We know what we need to run our own lives. I know what I need to be able to live my life the same as everybody else, to work, to play, to live.
Institutions are not solutions. Institutions offer disabled people no hope and no dreams.
If we're out there living in society, society is getting some return for their investment. Whereas if they hide us away and lock us up, there is no benefit in kind to the state from the disabled community. And if you wish to do that to 37 million people, you're losing an awful lot of potential that could be given back to the state.
Throughout Europe, there are many, many disabled people still living in institutions where they don't have any control of what happens in their lives, about when they can get up in the morning, go to bed at night, what they eat, how they live.
Direct payments are a cost-effective way of delivering a service to people, the service that they need, whether it be personal assistance, housing, transport, or aids and appliance. So we see the need for direct payments to be a choice in places like Ireland and throughout the EU.
Benefits disempower people, benefits create dependencies. What we're talking about here is independent living, the right to choose which lifestyle we live and how we choose to live it.
The money of the services should be turned over to us in the form of direct payments. Then we do a better job.
A direct payment package, which means that your local authority fund you to pay then for your own care, and by having the person of your choice to do that care, should be able to be transported. You should be able to take that wherever you want to in the EU, which isn't actually the case at the moment. So for me that's really crucial.
It's a challenging time because we have disability legislation pending for the remainder of this year. And certainly the service system is going to be highly tasked to deliver needs assessment, service coordination, and the logical extension of this over time would be a direct payment system.
Other fundamental issues, such as transport, were also addressed. Lack of accessible transportation is one of the major obstacles to full participation faced by people with disabilities.
The human right of being able to not be limited in the movement from one country to another country, limited by architectural barriers, limited by transportational barriers, limited by lack of funding. We believe that that's a human right.
It's no point in having a job if there is no transportation. And like in Norway, which is a very rich country, there are very few buses that we can use.
Without transport, we can do nothing. We can't live, we can't move.
If we had uniformity of service and acceptable standards, therefore it would be much easier for the disabled community to travel within Europe.
On Wednesday afternoon, all the Freedom Drivers were invited to attend a disability intergroup meeting dedicated to a discussion of the Strasbourg demands. NL President Mr John Evans and the Irish Freedom Driver Anne-Marie Flanagan addressed the assembled intergroup members and Freedom Drivers, encouraging the European Union to promote and develop new strategies and policies that would reflect the key 8 demands. In particular, they emphasised the need for personal assistance services as a necessary replacement for institutionalisation. It was stressed that progress can only be made if there is effective representation of people with disabilities in European inclusion strategies. Speaking on behalf of all Freedom Drive participants, Anne-Marie called on the Disability Intergroup to actively hear what was being said and to believe that the people saying it, people with disabilities, know best of all what will enable them to achieve full and active participation.
Personal assistance started out in Ireland based on a number of EU-funded programmes, and the experience of personal assistance in Dublin particularly and in the wider country area has been extremely positive and popular from an individual point of view. Also, the service providers have now seen the light in terms of the value of the service, the difference in how the service serves the needs of the individual, and the person-centeredness of the service.
I think that clearly the two major issues that make a radical difference to the lives of people with disabilities is access and the assistance of personal assistance.
If I need a home there this week, that's fine. Otherwise, not at the discretion of whoever administrates on my behalf.
Disabled people, I think, in England and other parts of the world have the right to independent living through personal assistance schemes, which allows us to be in control of our lifestyle.
The availability of the personal assistance service should be available indeed in every region, never mind in every country in Europe.
That the European Union needs to have a European policy on personal assistance.
We have the basic right to full-time personal assistance service, and if we stand united we will get it, and if we don't stand united we won't get it, because the politicians and lawmakers won't listen to individuals saying it. They will listen to a group saying it.
September 25th, the final day of the Freedom Drive, focused on the Court of Human Rights. The agenda included an introduction to and a tour of the Court of Human Rights, the Commission of Human Rights and the European Committee for the Prevention of Torture. The introduction to the Court of Human Rights focused on the history and workings of the court, aiming to inform the group as to how rights are upheld at a European level. Don Bailey, an Irish Freedom Driver, gave an account of the personal assistance service in Ireland, specifically focusing on the European Convention of Human Rights. Freedom Drivers met with the Committee for the Prevention of Torture, or CPT, in the afternoon. The CPT's task is to examine the treatment of persons deprived of their liberty, and in doing so it is entitled to visit any place where a public authority holds such persons. The CPT may then formulate recommendations to strengthen, if necessary, their protection against torture and inhumane or degrading treatment or punishment. Freedom Drive representatives met Hannah Juncker, who is involved with examining the circumstances of people cared for in intellectual disability services and for detained children. Inhumane and degrading treatment, which many people with disabilities might endure, is often the result of state-run or funded agencies not providing adequate support for people with disabilities to live with independence, dignity and personal choice.
The committees here and the people here are very shocked as to why there are still human rights abuses, why the rights of people with disabilities are being neglected in a state like Ireland, a state with a booming economy, with many people employed in human rights organisations, but yet people with disabilities have their rights denied. We've learned one thing today, that there is information out there, that this information can be disseminated to people with disabilities to empower us together.
In relation to the committee we met with for the prevention of torture, inhuman and degrading treatment, it's very pertinent to the lives of disabled people, despite that a lot of people don't actually realise that fact. And I think we really do need to work with that committee and support and inform that committee so that they can do their job more effectively for disabled people.
Strasbourg also offered a chance for people to socialise and build links with others from different countries who share similar experiences.
The importance of Strasbourg is that it's finally given people within the independent living movement the opportunity to take what they've been looking for within individual countries for many years outside of the nation states and bringing it to a larger forum like Europe.
This is not the end, this is merely the beginning, that we have taken it to a higher level. We are willing to push forward. We have very limited resources, but that is not going to stop us. We are going to continue. It's been a wonderful 3 days.
We all have to go back to our individual organisations to try to get them together under one huge, if possible, the word I'll use here is umbrella organisations.
The European Union and Ireland as a member state are both growing and changing. The Strasbourg Freedom Drive is an example of how effective people can be when they come together. It is clear that this was felt by all those who participated, as well indeed as by the politicians they met.
Well, of course, in Ireland, in spite of our divisions, which lead to our problems there, north and south and within the north, the problems of disabled people, no matter what community they come from, are all exactly the same. Therefore, there's no doubt that it's one issue that should unite all of the people, not only of Ireland, but of Europe, in dealing with the problems of disabled people and in taking the necessary action to assist them.
Infrequently do we get disabled people, representatives of the disability movement at the grassroots, actually with us in Strasbourg and in Brussels. And this event, 150 people genuinely representing the voice of disabled people at the local level, has been a very moving event that has enabled us to ensure the voice of disabled people and the call for full human and civil rights of disabled people is heard throughout this European Parliament.
I think we can all be proud to be part of this group of people, the disabled people, who, despite a lot of setbacks, despite a lot of, let's call it discrimination, still have the strength and the optimism to believe in the possibility of bringing about change with our limited means. I think we can make a difference. Each of us has shown in their own lives that we have made a difference. And together we will surely make an impact. It'll take time. That we may not even see it in our lifetimes, but that won't prevent us from fighting on, because we just can't sit there and let this happen.
2004 involves Ireland in a number of significant European Union events, including the Irish presidency, the enlargement process, and elections to the European Parliament, as well as a proposed EU constitution.
Now we're talking about a constitution for Europe. We're talking about what kind of Europe we're going to have in the future. A lot of decision making and a lot of decisions are going to come from here. Therefore, I think to go to the core of the decision making process is very, very important. So I think it'd be very important that the Irish government would pick up on this and would actually have concrete plans and proposals that they would want to push through during the Irish presidency for the European Union as a whole.
Coming with the event of the Constitution of Europe coming into play, which will be, in essence, the government of Europe in its true form. I believe that we should be hammering home more so now that we've been given word, not alone by our own Irish MEPs, but by MEPs from other states within the EU.
We also need to move one step forward outside of Ireland and to look at the European Union. And we must ensure that the new Constitution of Europe protects disabled people and offers the same opportunities as all other citizens.
We must keep the momentum going. This week was just the start of a process, particularly with the European elections taking place around next June. It's very important that if MEPs want our votes, they have to give us what we need and help us to exercise our rights.
People have listened to us over the last few days. We've got a territory, we've got a legal territory here, we've got a social territory, and I think we need to tell people back home that you can take this battle, the battle that people have been fighting for years and years and years. You can take it at a much higher level, and that potential exists. So I think we will tell people give them as much information as possible about the institutions here, about what goes on, about their rights. Their rights are not myths, they're real, they're enforceable, and they are set down in human rights standards and set down by human rights organisations here at the European level. And we must remember right now that the European laws that are coming and making our way fast towards our shores in Ireland will now be enforceable by people with disabilities against the Irish state. And I am speaking about the European Convention on Human Rights. We need to tell people about this convention because there are rights set forth in that convention.
Each event will provide organisations and individuals alike with opportunities to get involved in a process of change, to ensure the rights of people with disabilities are met on a regional, national and European basis. These were the thoughts and aspirations of all those who went to Strasbourg and came home both energised and motivated to continue the work of achieving a full and equal citizenship for all people with disabilities throughout the European Union.
My hope that someday people with disabilities will have equality, and I see that been quite a way away. That we have many battles to win before to have independent living for everybody who wishes it.
What we need to do is now take it home and work with our local MEPs and with our local parliaments to bring the issue forward so that in 2 years' time, when we come back for the Freedom Drive 2005, we're in a much stronger position.
We need leaders, not anybody else, people who live it every day or people who aspire to having independent living, coming together locally, regionally and nationally and constructing solutions and lobbying the powers that be. And I hope that the next time we come back that we're bringing hundreds and thousands of people and we flood the gates of the European Parliament. And I also absolutely believe that we will achieve full and equal citizenship because we are working together and we're working in solidarity under the European Network of Independent Living.
I think for the first time it's put independent living on the agenda on a European basis, and I hope that will result in real progress for disabled people across Europe. Disabled people obviously want to have the same choices and the same ability to control their life as everybody else. For the first time we put that into a coherent way, international stage.
I think in symbolic terms, I think the message of us coming to Strasbourg is showing that in unity, when disabled people come together, we have a lot of strength, we have a lot of power, we have a lot of vision. We know what we want, and by coming together, that is reinforced.
Wherever you are, whoever you are, don't give up fighting. You know, together we're strong, together we can do it.
Our slogan, nothing about us without us.